Hello and welcome to the Rabyd Atheist. I'm Rabyd, a former pastor turned atheist, now a compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. If you want to learn how to support this channel and its mission to normalize atheism and deconversion, stay tuned to the end of the video. This video is part of a series of videos entitled Questionable Witnesses, An Atheist Teaches Life of Christ. Today we'll be looking at the Christmas story itself and asking an important question. Was the birth of Jesus historical? I am teaching the Gospels very much like I did many times as churches as a pastor over the years, but now I'm teaching it as an atheist. The whole issue of this series has been to get to how many witnesses do the Gospel accounts actually have, and are they credible? The Bible's admonition of 2 or 3 witnesses is our first test. The next test is modern scholarship, which is a little more rigorous as to proving the truth or falsehood of claims with other criteria. Plus, I want to make any remarks to the story that I think are pertinent. I also want to make some deconversion notes. I'm going to read the story this time from the NIV. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria, and everyone went to their own town to register. So Joseph also went up to the town, from the town of Nazareth to Galilee of Judea to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born. She gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. On to our first test. The detailed story of Jesus' birth only appears in Luke 2, 1 through 7. So we only have one gospel witness of the story, and once again, the writer does not tell us his stories, and he's also still anonymous. Matthew simply tells us that Jesus is born, so we are left to Luke to get the details. Now, there are a few witnesses of the story in Mary herself and Joseph. Some might cite the innkeeper as a witness, but there's actually no innkeeper in the story. It just was told, that's conjectured based on the fact that they're told there are no guest rooms. Only that there are no rooms available for Mary is what's told to us. So once again, we have our couple as the only witnesses to the story, as all other witnesses would be speculation and conjecture, as they're not named or mentioned. Mary and Joseph are not witnesses that we can verify historically, and the whole point is to verify their existence and the event itself. It would have been helpful if we had actually the innkeeper's name or the name of the inn or the name of anything, but it's pretty anonymous at this point. All we will get later is some nameless shepherds, but more on that in the next episode, because really they don't actually witness the birth of Jesus just after it's all over. Once again, the Bible fails to meet its own very low bar standard of verifying events, and the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every event should be established. But once we get to more modern historical scholarship, this is where the writer of Luke makes many mistakes historically. Number 1, while Caesar Augustus would have been the emperor of Rome at the time of Jesus' birth, there is no record of him taxing the whole world, which would seem like there would be some sort of records, given that A, the tax is empire-wide and involved the first emperor of Rome, Caesar Augustus. But there is absolutely no good historical corroboration that this even took place. Romans were indeed fond of censuses and taxation, but there's no real record of they did this worldwide. They would do it very locally or regionally at times, and that was the way it was done. The second thing is Quirinius being governor of Syria at the time. While Quirinius was governor of Syria at one point, it was AD 6 through 12, way after Jesus is claimed to have been born. At this time, Jesus' birth, the governor's real name was Licinius, Calpurnius, Piso, Caesarius. Man, I love these Roman names. They always sound like good names for pasta. But it would also be weird, in my opinion, and now I'm getting more into my own thoughts about the passage on this particular issue, that people moved to have a census in the first place. It's unnecessary to do this, and it would actually undercut the benefit of a census. You want to actually have people register where they actually live. That way the census would not only know who the people were, but where they lived and in what circumstances to a certain extent. If you're doing a registry type census where people go to a place, list their name, list their dependents, and list the members of their household and who lives there with them. In that case, you get a whole hell of a lot more information. Modern censuses do this on purpose. They ask a lot of questions because it's more than just about counting people. It's about getting information. And if you want to know where people live, have them register where they live. You wouldn't get this kind of census, I think, on a practical level from a political science view. And it sounds more like a literary device made up for the story to get Jesus to fulfill the messianic prophecy of him being born in Bethlehem. My criticism of both stories is actually this very thing. Jesus was known as Jesus of Nazareth, and this is one of the criticisms we only had Mark as our sources, that there is no Jesus being born in Bethlehem or any connection with him to Bethlehem. No problem. Both Matthew and Luke will write later and put Jesus in the town of Bethlehem at the time of his birth. The problem is that their accounts are completely different, and you have to weave them together. Almost at no point do they overlap. Matthew takes the opportunity, as we'll see later in this series, to bash Herod at the same time he puts Jesus in Bethlehem, and Luke gives us a few more details, but botches the historical facts around the birth. I mean, big time. Unless you believe that Jesus was born on an alternate timeline and got time switched, this just doesn't line up. Luke's bad history calls into question whether or not he is being historical at all. He completely miffs who the governor of Syria would be at the time. Or, unless you want to say that Jesus was born later in 6 to 12 AD, but no scholarship or even Christian scholarship wants to do that. So you're left with kind of holding the bag. As for the rest of the story, it's kind of a nice little narrative, and it's not very long at this point because I left out the shepherds. We'll get to that to the next episode, asking the question whether the shepherds, who they were. What we do get here is, Jesus' very simple, humble birth, but it's not as humble as it seems. The issue of Jesus being born in some stable is kind of a misnomer. There would have been, if such a census had taken place, Bethlehem would have been crowded, which means everybody, caravanners, everybody who couldn't find a guest room, would have been staying in the common area, and Mary would have given birth in a very public manner, but she wouldn't have probably been alone, given how crowded the place was. So you have this situation where there are so many things, by putting Jesus in Bethlehem and having it be crowded and having there being no room in the inn and having there being this census that apparently never took place, you have all this ambiguity put around the story, but the one thing for sure you do get is Jesus is in Bethlehem and thus fulfills a messianic prophecy. The real issue at this point for me is if Luke is so bad at the history, he makes up a situation that apparently probably never existed. It doesn't even make sense that the Roman governor would do this or that the Roman Empire would do this. You wouldn't do a census this way, even back then. Roman censuses tended to have you register, but it was always where you lived, where you actually lived, because they wanted to know who was going to be taxed and by how much. And so this is a big historical whiff by the writer of Luke. From a deconversion point of view, these are the moments when you're deconverting, when you realize that the Bible got something completely and utterly wrong. And the first 3 verses of Luke chapter 2 are complete, utter historical failure. I can't emphasize how bad history this is. And this isn't a question of higher criticism even. This is a question of basic Roman Empire history scholarship, where we have tons of records who governors were and all kinds of different things that are given to us by multiple different sources. The Romans were very good at keeping political records, and the Latin texts are legion here. So this is not something that is like a historical criticism giving some sort of alternate or speculation. The guy most likely to be the governor of Syria at the time of Jesus' birth is not Quirinius. It's Licinius, Calpurnius, Piso, Caesarionius. And I'm sorry, that's the most likely guy who would have been governor of Syria at the time. Luke gets it completely wrong. He gets the census wrong. There's no evidence for that. It doesn't make sense, the kind of census that is taken. And the governor of Syria is completely wrong. If he's so wrong about all that, why should I trust him about any other thing that he says actually happened, including the narrative of Jesus' birth in the town of Bethlehem, where he's laid in a wrapped in cloths and laid in a manger. It's it just isn't there. Why would I trust that account if he gets all the rest of it so wrong? And when you're deconverting, this becomes really problematic for something else. How do you maintain the idea that the Bible is the Word of God and inspired by God if God can't even inspire proper history? Because if this was properly done, it would have been Jesus's parents already lived in Bethlehem because that's where they settled. And then you would have the actual name of the real governor that was governor of Syria. You would have had a tax that made sense and a census that made sense. This doesn't pass the smell test at all from a history point of view. This is where, if Luke is what did say that he was trying to provide a history, which he doesn't, he just says he's trying to collect the stories and put them in order. At this point, we would label the writer of Luke as somebody whose history is questionable and whether we can trust it or not. We do this with other historical people who write history. There is a kind of a pecking order of who, stands the test of time as, we can verify what they said here. We can verify what they said here. And then we have other historians, we go, some of the crap that he writes is off, okay? And he's writing from a certain point of view. And so we give them less credence. At this point, if Luke was being considered a historian, the actual verifiable historical facts he has are completely missed. And so even if I was going to take the Gospels as history right now, Luke as a history writer, because he misses this up so much, it calls into question how accurate his history would be in the first place. And this is, when you're deconverting, this is the kind of stuff that kicks you in right where it counts. Because you end up going, man, the Bible is clearly and evidentially wrong here. Okay, it's not even close. Okay, and so it calls into question whether or not the rest of the story is even correct. But it also calls into question whether this is inspired by God. Why would God inspire such an awful mistake when he could have easily corrected it by scrambling Luke's brain and saying, hey, you know what? Here's what really happened. Caesar Augustus never did a census like this, and censuses only make sense if they go to the place where they are, things like that. And as a deconverting person, that would make more sense if the Bible was actually inspired by God. But then we have to say that not only Luke is a bad historian, God inspires Luke badly to give him bad history. And so the whole inspiration of Scripture starts to come unraveled for you when you're deconverting. This brings up the issue of deconversion a lot, because it's moments like this when you're studying the text and you're studying the facts and you actually have in the Bible something that can be historically verified, and you suddenly realize that the Bible got it wrong. Okay, this is the deconversion moments that all of us deal with. And it's some of this stuff, this passage in particular was very damning to me when it came to the Gospels, because I suddenly realized that the Gospel writers weren't writing history because they got the history part really wrong, and it's very evidently wrong. We can have the evidence of how badly wrong it is. And so how do you maintain that a God inspired this from a theological point of view? When I was a theologian dealing with this theologically, it was like this became a problem. Because now I have to deal with the fact that the Bible gets history wrong. And why would it do that if it was inspired? This is one of the passages that caused me to kind of question how God would have inspired the Bible and still make these kind of mistakes. I ended up at a place called dynamic inspiration, where the Bible is very human and very divine, much like Jesus. I kind of took that from Karl Barth. But the more I thought about that, I couldn't prove the divine part. And the divine part rests on history. I've had many comments about how the Bible can't give me the proof that I seek. But as my apologist professor in Bible college said, if the Bible doesn't rest on history, it rests on nothing. Okay, it makes historical claims. Okay, it makes claims about reality. And if those claims don't line up with reality or history, then they're just straight up wrong. And the Bible is wrong, and that means it's not inspired by God. And this is a hard thing to come, you come to the intellectual conclusion that this is true, but the emotions keep you in. So many people want to claim that people who deconvert like myself are doing so for emotional reasons. No, we're doing it for reasons because of this kind of thing, where the Bible totally muffs. It's like a, 3 swings, all misses, strikeout, go sit down. Okay, that's how bad this is. Okay, it's that bad. Okay, to maintain somehow that this is not right or anything like that's flying in the face of historical scholarship about Roman history. Forget higher biblical criticism, lower biblical criticism. This is straight up, you messed up the history of the Roman Empire, which is well documented. So there you have it. I guess I'll leave it at there. I'm going to get to the shepherds in the next episode because I think they bring up some interesting questions too. But at this point, I would just say that this kind of is what led me to the understanding that both Matthew and Luke might very well be making up their narratives, and that's why their narratives are so different. They didn't have time to corroborate with each other or collaborate with each other on what the birth narrative should be. And so they wrote 2 very different narratives in order to deal with a problem. One, that Jesus had to be born of a virgin based on a misunderstood translation by the Septuagint, but the other one that he had to be born in Bethlehem. And so they had to somehow get this character, Jesus of Nazareth, that Mark writes about, who never seems to appear in Bethlehem at all, to actually be from Bethlehem. And that's how they did it. This whole census thing is trying to prove a legal thing. And it would have been nice if the census itself was still around and hanging around as paperwork, but it's not, because it doesn't seem to have existed. So for those of you that are deconverting, hang in there. It's moments like this, as you well know and I well know, that cause us to realize that our Bible is just a work of human beings writing a story and trying to maintain a narrative. And they've been doing this since the very beginning, and they're still doing it today. Well, thanks for stopping by. I'm always interested in what you have to say in the comments, so comment away. So far, nobody's really overturned a lot of what I've had to say here, so although some people have added a little bit of light, and I always appreciate that when we added a few more details and some different thoughts on it, appreciate that very, very much. So comment away, it helps me out. Like, share, subscribe. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. It just helps me. I'm trying to, hopefully by the end of 2025, be at 10K and moving forward with this channel. So anything you do to help me grow and help me get this video noticed is greatly appreciated. And there are many ways, of course, to support this channel's mission of normalizing atheism and deconversion. You can hit my PayPal link and donate to me directly, or you can do super chat, super thanks. But the best way to support the channel is the monthly membership, where you become a citizen of the Rabyd Nation at various levels with various ranks and privileges. Just hit the join button and you can check that out. But as always, live your best life. You only get one go around and then it's over. And so you want to take all your time, your money, and opportunities and give them to yourself, the people you love and care for, and to make this a better world. You'll be happier if you do. And don't waste them on the trappings of religion and faith, because that's a dead end. I speak from experience. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and I will catch you next time.